From the foregoing, therefore, it can be clearly shown that the human soul cannot be corrupted by a corrupt body. For above all, intellectual substance has been shown to be incorruptible. Now the soul of man is a kind of intellectual substance, as has been shown. Therefore the human soul must be incorruptible. Still, no thing is corrupted by that in which its perfection consists. For these changes are contrary, that is, to perfection and corruption. But the perfection of the human soul consists in a certain abstraction from the body. For the soul is perfected by knowledge and by virtue. But according to knowledge, it is so much more perfected, the more it considers immaterial things. But the perfection of virtue consists in the fact that a man does not follow the passions of the body, but controls and restrains them according to reason. Therefore, the corruption of the soul does not consist in its being separated from the body. Now, if it is said that the perfection of the soul consists in its separation from the body, according to its operation, and its corruption in its separation according to its being, it is not properly obviated. For the operation of a thing demonstrates its substance and being, because each thing operates according to what it is, and the proper operation of a thing follows its proper nature. Therefore, the operation of a thing cannot be completed unless its substance is completed. If, therefore, the soul according to its operation is perfected in leaving the body, its incorporeal substance will not fail in its being by the fact that it is separated from the body. Again, the proper perfective of man according to the soul is something incorruptible, for the proper operation of man as such is to understand. For by this he differs from beasts, plants, and inanimate beings. But to understand it is universal and incorruptible as such. But the perfections must be proportionate to the perfectibles. Therefore the human soul is incorruptible. Further, it is impossible for a natural appetite to be in vain. But man naturally desires to remain forever. This is evident from the fact that existence is what is desired by all. But man grasps existence through the intellect not only as it is now, like brute animals, but simply. Therefore man attains perpetuity according to the soul, by which he grasps being simply and according to all time. Again, everything that is received in something is received in it according to the manner in which it is. Now the forms of things are received in the possible understanding as they are actually intelligible. But they are actually intelligible inasmuch as they are immaterial, universal, and consequently incorruptible. Therefore the possible intellect is incorruptible. But, as was proved above, the possible intellect is something of the human soul. Therefore the human soul is incorruptible. Still, being intelligible is more permanent than being sensible. But that which exists in sensible things by way of the first recipient is incorruptible according to its substance, that is, first matter. Therefore, the possible intellect is much stronger, which is receptive to intelligible forms. Therefore, the human soul, of which the intellect is a possible part, is incorruptible. Further, the doing is more honorable than the done, as Aristotle also says. But the active intellect actually makes things intelligible, as is clear from the foregoing. Therefore, when the intelligibles are actually incorruptible as such, the acting intellect will be incorruptible much more strongly. Therefore also the human soul, whose light is the active intellect, as is clear from the foregoing. Again, no form is corrupted unless either by the action of the opposite, or by the corruption of its subject, or by the failure of its cause. Indeed, by the action of the opposite, as heat is destroyed by the action of cold. But through the corruption of its subject, as with a destroyed eye, the visual power is destroyed, but through the lack of a cause, just as the light of the air fails when the presence of the sun fails, which was its cause. But the human soul cannot be corrupted by the action of the contrary, for there is nothing contrary to it, since through the possible intellect it is cognitive and receptive of all opposites, nor in the same way through the corruption of its subject. For it was shown above that the human soul is a form not dependent on the body according to its own nature, similarly, nor through the deficiency of its cause, for it cannot have any cause but an eternal one, as will be shown below. Still, if the soul is corrupted by the corruption of the body, its being must be weakened by the weakness of the body. Now if any power of the soul is weakened by a weakened body, this is only by accident, inasmuch as the power of the soul needs a bodily organ, just as sight is weakened by a weakened organ, however by accident. This is clear from this, for if any weakness were to happen to the power itself, it would never be restored by a repaired organ. But we see that no matter how much the visual power seems weakened, if the organ is repaired, the visual power is restored. Whence Aristotle says, in De Anima 1, that if an old man receives the eye of a young man, he would certainly see like a young man. Since, therefore, the intellect is a power of the soul, which does not need an organ, as is evident from the foregoing, it is not weakened, either by itself or by accident, by old age, or by some other infirmity of the body. But if fatigue or hindrance occurs in the operation of the intellect because of the weakness of the body, this is not because of the weakness of the intellect itself, but because of the weakness of the powers which the intellect needs, namely the powers of imagination, memory, and thinking. It is clear, then, that the intellect is incorruptible. Therefore also the human soul, which is a kind of intellectual substance. This also appears on the authority of Aristotle, for he says in De Anima 1 that the intellect seems to be a kind of substance and not to be corrupted. Now that this cannot be understood of any separate substance, which is a possible or active intellect, may be inferred from the premises. Moreover, it appears from the very words of Aristotle in Metaphysics 11, where he says, speaking against Plato, that moving causes pre-exist, but causes are formal at the same time as those of which they are causes. For when a man is healed, then is he healed, and not before, contrary to the fact that Plato held that the forms of things pre-existed things. And having said these things, he afterwards adds, and if something remains afterwards, it must be examined. For in some cases nothing prevents it, as if there is such a soul. Not all, but understanding. From this it is clear, when he speaks of forms, that he wants the intellect, which is the form of man, to remain after the matter, that is, after the body. Now it is clear from the preceding words of Aristotle that, although he posits that the soul is a form, he does not posit it as non-subsisting and consequently corruptible, as Gregory of Nyssa imposes on it, for he excludes the intellectual soul from the generality of other forms, saying that it remains after the body, and that it is a kind of substance. But the foregoing opinion agrees with the Catholic faith, for it is said in the Book of Wisdoms, Dogmas, we believe that only man has a substantive soul, which lives even without a body and keeps alive its senses and faculties. Nor does it die with the body, as the Arabs assert, nor after a short interval, as Zeno, because he lives substantially. By this means the error of the wicked is excluded, of whose person Solomon says, Wisdom 2:2. We were born from nothing, and after this we will be as if we had not been, and from whose person Solomon says, Wisdom 3:19, the destruction of men and cattle is one, and the condition of both is equal. As a man dies, so they also die. Everything breathes in the same way, and man has nothing more than cattle. For that he speaks not of his own person, but of the wicked, is evident from the fact that at the end of the book he adds, as if determining, until the dust returns to its earth from whence it was, and the spirit returns to him who gave it. There are also innumerable authorities of the Holy Scriptures which protest against the immortality of the soul.